Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Truckee Tower podcast and this segment of Venture Capital Expert Insights. I'm really excited to be joined today by Noah Berkson. How are you doing, Noah?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on with me. I'm really excited to talk with you. You know, this is all about tips for success, pitfalls to avoid, and how we might be able to help you as well. And so just talking, we were talking before the recording. I learned a few things about you. First of all, you went to the University of Iowa in enterprise leadership, and then also the Wharton School as well.
Yep.
Just to kind of kick us off, where were you? What happened? Who were you surrounded with that inspired you to do what you do today?
It's a great question. I did an internship at the Board of Exchange, and this was in my freshman year of college, and I thought at first freshman year, I was like, you know what, I was pre-med, I declared pre-med and said, hey, I'm going to go and be an ophthalmologist. I saw a big business opportunity there with LASIK surgery centers. Realized I was in that for all the wrong reasons. Probably don't go into medicine because you're trying to build a business. And then I said, you know what, I'm going to go into, trading or investment banking, and got an internship. And it was the first day. And I walked in early in the morning, because you're trading global markets. And, I just looked around, and everyone around me, seemingly had it all, making a ton of money. Their job was not horribly difficult, but no one seemed happy. People just seemed like it was a drag to be there. Life was a drag. And I realized right then, I said, you know what, like I need to do something for myself, and I need to work for myself because I don't ever want to be that age and feel that way. And that kind of set me out on my entrepreneurial journey.
Very good. And you're invested in a number of different companies, and you're also the CEO of DevBase. You've got a lot of things going on in this whole area of venture capital, capital funding, entrepreneurship. What are some of the top 2 or 3 mistakes to avoid that you've seen in pitches and companies trying to grow and so forth? So what are some of the big mistakes to avoid?
Yeah, a few things I think from my experience being an entrepreneur. I've started a few different tech businesses previous to this, and now kind of sit on the other side of the table. But I think moving from handshakes to contracts quickly. That's one thing that we see constantly, where early stage companies, they have very undefined things of, hey, we started the business, never put together a formal operating agreement. We have a few people involved with it. Their expectations of what they have in the business or their positions in the business are, much different depending on who you talk to. And that always creates issues down the road. So, it's like everyone says, oh, like, let's just see where this goes. Let's make sure, we get some traction, then we'll figure all this, all of the details out. And that's always the wrong time, because emotions get heightened. You get other people like us, investors coming in that then have a say in that equation, and just makes things a whole lot more complicated for everybody. So certainly just like moving away from handshakes, getting things defined very early on, something I think is really, really important. Past success doesn't dictate future success. So at least from the venture side, looking at people, everyone's like, well, they're a proven operator, and that very well may be, but things change and motivations change, and people get comfortable, they kind of lose that hunger or that hustle. And because they've done something in the past, it doesn't mean they'll be successful in the future. And we see this a lot, where people are coming and saying, hey, I have this idea, I sold a previous business, and now I have this idea, and I'm valuing it at whatever it is, $40 million, $60 million, $80 million for an idea, basically because they've done something before. And for us, we don't look at things that way. Lastly, something I see just with a lot of entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs are mentors. Mentors are great, but I think a lot of times what you see is people go seek out mentors, and they say, this guy sold multiple companies, and he's been in this industry for 25 years, things like that. And I think a lot of time those people, while they're great, they did this at a completely different time in the world, and they did things differently, and things were different, and they may be very out of touch with actually good advice for you, because it just was a different playing field. And so I always tell people, like, opt to find someone that's a year or 2 years ahead of you right now and learn from them, right? They don't need to have sold a business. They don't need to have been ultra successful. They can be on their way, but those people are where you're going to learn what is actually necessary to be successful right now, or pitfalls to avoid, right? I mean, I think that learning lessons, negatives and positives, the negatives are almost better, and just learning, oh, they did this, I wouldn't do it that way. So I think that's really important. Just find somebody that's 1-2 years ahead of you and stick with them.
Great advice. I think that's all very relevant, and things have changed a lot. Just in the 25 years that I've been in business, things have changed dramatically. I mean, just crazy. I was thinking the other day, the very first marketing project I had was looking at a mailer, 3 different designs of cartoons for a mail out, and making decisions on what design, resonated the most. And then the inbound was phone calls. Now it's digital. I mean, digital is where it's at. In fact, video, I think, and digital are where it's at. And it's just changed so much.
I laugh now. A couple of things you just said. On the mailer side, we own this company called cashrent.com, and it's a farmland leasing marketplace. And it's the first business that I've ever been involved with where we're actually doing mailers. And I was like, this is crazy, but like people are really receptive to them still, which I just had no idea. I would never think that, hey, we should go send out mailers. That seems ridiculous. But also on the, inbound or outbound calling, I now, like, I have a spam blocker on my phone that I don't even see numbers that are unknown that call me. It doesn't even ever show up. Right. So that's just got to be such a different world for someone who grew up, maybe doing cold calling. And it's like, now that's got to be close to impossible to get anything done on the phone.
Yes, I've seen it, change over the years. And I think, like you said, direct mail works in certain industries and segments. But my personal experience was back in 2018, I switched to using LinkedIn for introductions and meetings, and 10x my own sales pipeline in 6 months with that.
Yep.
And I compared it with spending money doing city blitzes, is what we called it, where you go into a city with an anchor meeting and then you go around the city and have a 2 or 3 other stop bys and so forth. You compare the amount of money spent and the end result with the 2 different ones, and it's just 15-fold better on the digital side, basically.
A lot of companies probably realize that with COVID too, right? You had all these people traveling, and now it's like, well, they could just use LinkedIn, and they're probably going to be a lot better off, actually get more meetings, not spend all the money of doing that. I remember when I started out, I would write somebody that I wanted to, sit down with and say, hey, I'm going to be in your city, these days, if you're able to get together. And they'd be like, oh, Tuesday works. And I'd be like, all right, better book a flight there Tuesday, right? Like just trying to do anything you can to get in front of people. But
yep, I did the same thing. I'll be in your town this week, to 55 people, and try and get 3 or 4 meetings basically. But all the time and travel involved with that, is something else. And of course, like you said, the pandemic changed things. It fast tracked the whole digital reach, market basically. So on the flip side, what are some of the top success secrets that you've seen from successful ventures, successful entrepreneurs? What are some of the top success secrets that you've seen?
I think on the startup side, something a little bit, doesn't seem like it should be the case, but really is. It's just your network is everything. Right. I think, it speaks volumes about your credibility before you ever walk in the door. And, you see companies that you don't even really need much of a pitch deck, but, someone in your network will be like, this is a really smart, I know this person, really smart founder, they're going to do really well. And the amount of money people can raise doing that, just leveraging their network and the credibility that comes from a network. I think people don't focus on that enough. And you just see, on LinkedIn all the time, right? I'll get cold every day, probably 20 to 30 cold messages that are like, we're raising money. Here's our pitch deck. Are you interested? It's going to close on Friday. Let us know. And it's like, one, it's kind of crazy that they think anyone is going to invest like that. But, if it would have been, hey, I know this person and that person vouches for you, pretty quickly, we'll put our diligence eyes on, and almost probably have a little bit of blinders, because if we trust that person and they say, hey, this is a great entrepreneur, then we're a lot more likely to get into those deals. I think personally, right, like I think your problems just tend to, which you're bound to have a lot of them, especially when starting a business, they adjust to their level of importance after a good workout and a good night of sleep. I realized that I would just, you'd have all of these things in the moment, that the world is falling apart, this is detrimental to our business, and that happens pretty much on a daily basis. Something happens, and so just realizing, what, like, this is gonna be okay, I'm gonna work out, I'm gonna get a good sleep, and then I'll deal with this tomorrow. And pretty much every time, that next day, you're like, oh, that's not that bad, that's totally fine. And your whole mentality has changed. So just not making decisions in the moment, and making rash decisions. Cause I think it's very easy to in a startup, right? Like, oh, we're gonna lose this customer, or this didn't go super well, or everything's kind of the end of the world. This investor decided to put this on pause, but typically that really isn't the case. And the other thing is just failure is inevitable, and you want to fail. And I think as investors, what we look at is, I want to see someone's failed, and they've failed over and over, because if they have, I know that they have the grit and what it takes to keep going if they're there today. So I think, when failure is expensive, plan carefully, right? When failure could cost something big, plan carefully. But when failure's cheap and it's not going to be detrimental, like fail, and just be able to talk about it. And I think that brings a lot more credibility than success ever does.
Right. Absolutely. There's a famous story, I think it's about Edison creating the light bulb, where it failed like 900 times. But once it was invented, we use them everywhere. So, you can't be afraid to try things. And I think, honestly, you learn way more from failures and adjustments than you do when it's just flowing. You learn a lot more. It may be more painful, but you do learn a lot more, actually, I think. So, what are you working on, and how can we support you, Noah?
Yeah. So Candor Ventures is the company that we invest out of. So we have an early stage fund and venture studio. We invest in early stage technology companies. So if you're an early stage company or thinking about starting a business in the technology space, we'd love to talk to you.
Very good. Overall, what would you say about your experience of booking and coming on the show?
It was the easiest experience ever, and obviously great relationship building here. And it was a pleasure to talk to you, and it sounds like we'll be speaking in the future.
Absolutely. I've got some things in mind for your company, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you. So what would you say as a final word of advice in this whole area of capital funding and entrepreneurship? What would you say as a final word?
I would say just be authentic, right? People are betting on the entrepreneurs, and we want to know who you are, much more so than even what the business plan is. We want to know about you first, and why, because we're betting on you. Anything early stage, it's all about you. So be authentic, be yourself. And I think that's going to lead to a lot more success than just showing me, why this business is the best idea ever.
Right. Everybody thinks theirs is the best idea ever. But I really appreciate your tips for success and pitfalls to avoid. And really appreciate you coming on with me today, Noah.
Thanks so much, Andy. Well, we'll be in touch soon here.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks everybody for joining us on the Trucking Tower podcast. That's going to do it for this segment, and we'll see you soon.